Have you ever walked into a room full of laughter, lighthearted talk, and the clinking of glasses only, to feel like you were speaking a different language the moment you opened your mouth? There's a kind of quiet sorrow that deep thinkers carry, and it's not the kind that demands to be noticed. It doesn't shout, it doesn't break down in front of others, it simply stays heavy and invisible like a shadow clinging to the soul. This is the pain of noticing too much, of catching the pauses between words, of hearing what others leave unsaid. It's the ache of feeling emotions no one dares to name. Picture this. You're sitting at a dinner table. The conversation drifts as Elisaman comments on the weather. Another chuckles over the latest neighborhood gossip. Everyone smiles, nods, and glides along the surface. But then you speak. You say something honest. Something real. Something that gently pierces the comfortable illusion. And just like that, the energy shifts. You've broken the rhythm. No one quite knows how to respond. A glance is exchanged. Mom shifts awkwardly in their seat. There's a quick cough, a nervous laugh, a change of topic. Anyway, someone says, trying to steer the moment back to safety. But you noticed. You always do. That subtle rejection, that quiet unease, it cuts deeper than it should. And it happens more often than you'd like to admit. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He knew that the more a person dives into their own psyche, the more distant they may feel from the world around them, but not because they're flawed or broken. It's rather because society prefers comfort over truth. Clings to illusions. It uplifts those who fit in, who conform, who laugh at the right time and never ask the questions that rattle the walls. Those who smile when they're breaking inside, those who pretend. But deep thinkers, those who can't unsee what they've seen, don't pretend. They can't. They notice the cracks in the smiles, the emptiness behind tradition, the performance in everyday life. Jung once said, the more intelligent and self-aware a person is, the more they suffer from the general unconsciousness of society. That wasn't meant to flatter, it was a warning. Because in a world that avoids depth, being self-aware doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like isolation. And that isolation often begins early. From childhood, deep thinkers are labeled as too much. They ask uncomfortable questions. Why do adults lie? Why do the rules keep changing? Why does love sometimes feel like a test? Instead of honest answers, they're met with silence or reprimand. Don't ask so many questions. Just do what you're told. Why can't you be more like the others? So they quiet down. But the questions don't disappear. They grow sharper, heavier by adulthood. These individuals have built vast inner worlds, landscapes of unspoken truths, quiet observations, and unfiltered emotion. But the external world isn't built to hold that kind of depth. In professional spaces, they're urged to follow scripts. In relationships, they're often told they're too intense. Online, they're encouraged to smile, to stay light, to just be positive. So they retreat, not out of weakness. It's not because they want to, but because they've learned the consequences of being real in a world that prefers the mask. Carl Jung believed that society fears what it does not understand, and deep thinkers, they are deeply misunderstood. That truth lingers beneath the surface of so many interactions. They move through life with a mind that never stops, a heart that feels too much, and an awareness that often sets them apart. But this depth, instead of being celebrated, is often misread. When you express a complex idea, something layered, thoughtful, maybe even uncomfortable, people don't see the insight. They see arrogance. They assume you're trying to prove something. When you sit quietly, choosing to observe rather than speak, they think you're judging them. When you speak of trauma not for attention, but in the name of truth and healing, they label you as dramatic. When you ask sincere, searching questions, you're told you're overthinking, but you're not overthinking. You're seeing clearly. You're tuned into things others overlook: the tension in someone's voice, the sadness behind a smile, the contradictions in their words. You're feeling what others have spent their whole lives learning to avoid. And that makes people uneasy, not because you're mistaken, but because you're accurate. Because you speak truths that others spend their entire lives running from. You pull the curtains back. You shine light on the shadows they've hidden for years. You remind them, often without meaning to, that something is off, that something is missing. And that kind of reminder, it doesn't feel like help. It feels like a threat. That's why. Deep thinkers are often met with subtle resistance, uncomfortable laughter, or even outright rejection. Not because of who they are, but because of what they reflect. A mirror. You become a mirror to all that's been buried. You reflect the fears, the doubts, the wounds others have never dared to confront. Carl Jung called this the encounter with the shadow. The moment someone sees the parts of themselves they've denied. Most people don't want that. So instead, they reject the person who brings it. And that person, more often than not, is you. Have you ever tried to warn someone before it was too late? Spoken a difficult truth, hoping to spare them future pain. Tried to show someone a self-destructive pattern they were stuck in. And instead of gratitude, you were met with silence, or irritation, or worse, completely shut out. Ghosted, you weren't. Being negative, you were being honest. But honesty is dangerous, because real doesn't entertain, real doesn't comfort, real doesn't go viral. Real makes people think, and thinking. That burns. Jung once said that most people don't think, they merely rearrange their prejudices. They defend the beliefs they inherited, they echo what they've heard. They perform the roles they were given, but deep thinkers, they do more. They ask, they unlearn, they analyze, and reconstruct. They stay awake long into the night, untangling internal contradictions that others don't even notice. They don't chase popularity, they seek clarity. And in that pursuit, they often lose the approval of those who only live on the surface. That's the quiet tragedy of awareness. The more awake you become, the more alone you often feel. Not because something is wrong with you, but because so many others are still asleep. And even in that loneliness, you try to bridge the gap. You soften your words, you dim your light, you try again and again to make yourself smaller, easier. To accept, you try to blend in. But it never lasts, does it? Because truth has a frequency. And once your soul vibrates at that level, you can't go back to pretending. You can't lie to yourself just to make others more comfortable. You can't hide what you've already seen. So what now? Where do you go from here? How do you exist in a world that fears the very thing you are? That's what we explore next. If you've ever felt like you were too much for the world, you weren't wrong. You weren't broken. You were simply born into a system that was never built to support depth. Carl Jung called it mass-mindedness. It's the idea that most people don't think independently. They don't explore the truth for. They simply absorb what culture gives them without questioning if it's real, if it's right, or if it's even theirs to believe. Most people don't pause to ask, does this actually make sense to me? Or do I even agree with this? Instead, they take it all in beliefs, values, behaviors, as if they were born with them, as if those ideas are their own. They're not. From the very beginning, you're handed a script the moment you enter the world. You're told what's good and what's bad. You're taught the meaning of success and warned about the shame of failure. You're conditioned to compete rather than collaborate, to obey instead of question. You're expected to smile even when sadness sits in your chest. To be polite even when someone disrespects you, and if you follow that script perfectly, the world rewards you. It calls you mature, successful, well-adjusted. You fit, you please, you blend. But the moment you start to question that script, even gently, even if all you ask is, why are we doing this? You become a problem. You disrupt the rhythm. You disturb the illusion. Suddenly, you're not seen as thoughtful. You're labeled too sensitive, too intense, too negative, too complicated. But the truth is, you're not to anything. You're just awake, and the world fears what's awake because awareness is power. Let's go deeper. Think back to your earliest memories of school. What were you truly rewarded for? Was it your imagination, your empathy, your ability to connect dots others didn't even see? Or were you praised for sitting still, for repeating the right answers, for coloring inside the lines and asking no questions? For many deep thinkers, school is the first environment where they feel the crushing weight of conformity. It starts early. You're lined up in rows, told when to speak, when to be quiet, and what to think. You're graded not on originality, but on obedience. Not on insight, but on memorization. It's not about truth, it's about control. The rules aren't explained. The authority isn't questioned. If you do question it, you're either ignored or corrected. Because the system doesn't want thinkers. It wants followers. Followers are easy to manage. They're predictable. They maintain the status quo. Carl Jung saw this with chilling clarity. He believed that any system that discourages inner exploration is a system rooted in fear of change, fear of complexity, fear of the soul's raw truth. And over time, that fear doesn't just remain in the classroom, it seeps into the culture. It shows up in how we date, where shallow attraction is often celebrated more than deep emotional connection. It shows up in how we work, where productivity is praised over meaning and status over authenticity. It shows up in how we live, constantly rushing, endlessly chasing, mindlessly scrolling, airily pausing to ask, is this even what I want? Believe the soul isn't built to operate at the speed of modern life. It needs something slower, softer, deeper. The soul needs quiet, shadow, solitude, stillness, reflection, not noise. But here's where deep thinkers are different. They don't just long for that stillness, they create it. They carve it into their lives. They protect it. And when they walk into a room, people feel it. There's a presence of calm. Focused awareness that feels both grounding and unsettling. A silence that isn't empty, but full of unseen depth. Their gaze doesn't just look, it sees. It's in being. Seen. Truly seen. Is terrifying for those who have spent their entire lives hiding from themselves. That's why people pull away. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because seeing you forces them to see themselves and they're not ready. So they retreat. They label you too much. A loner, weird. They create distance. Not out of hate, but out of self-protection. And that's why so many deep thinkers walk alone, not because they're broken, but because they vibrate at a frequency most people aren't tuned into. ... They live at a frequency most people aren't tuned into. Carl Jung said loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. That line lingers in the mind, doesn't it? It stings because it reflects something we've all felt, but rarely admit aloud. The pain isn't in isolation, it's in disconnection. How many times have you wanted to speak not about the weather, not about headlines, but about something real? About grief, about healing, about purpose or pain or the fragile nature of existence. And yet when you do, what meets you? Silence. Or worse, small talk. A polite nod, a subject change, a glance at a phone. How often have you seen through someone's mask, recognized their struggle, but stayed silent because you sensed they weren't ready to be seen? How many times have you had to shrink your depth just to be understood, to be accepted, to not overwhelm those around you? That isn't true connection. That's survival. And surviving in a world that misunderstands and even rejects depth, it takes its toll. Over time, you begin to question yourself. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I am overthinking. Maybe I should just go along with it all. You start wondering if the problem is you. But don't. Please don't. Because the moment you begin to dilute your essence, the moment you start to dull your perception to fit in, that's the moment you begin to lose your soul. And would never want that for you. He believed that the only real hope for the world lies in individuals who are brave enough to stay awake in a society that would rather remain unconscious, brave enough to keep asking the difficult questions, even when the answers hurt, brave enough to remain sensitive in a world that praises numbness. You are that hope. But let's be honest, being a deep thinker doesn't make life easier. It makes it harder, because you don't get to live in denial. You don't get to distract yourself from the discomfort. You can't simply scroll past the ache in your chest when something feels off. You feel it all. You feel the contradictions, the injustices, the beauty, the absurdity, the silence that speaks louder than words, and in a world that trains us to numb to scroll. Consume, avoid feeling becomes an act of rebellion. So rebel, if you identify as a deep thinker, there's a good chance you've asked yourself at some point, why am I always so exhausted? Not physically, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally. You walk into a room and sense the unspoken tension before a single word is exchanged. You have a conversation, and you don't just hear what someone says. You hear what they don't say. You feel the sadness behind their smile. It's the fear behind their anger, the longing behind their indifference. And when it's over, they walk away feeling lighter, more understood, maybe even healed. But you're left depleted. Like the air has been slowly drained from your lungs, and you ask yourself, why do you? People always come to me for support, but vanish when I need someone. Carl Jung had a name for this. He called it projection. And he spoke of something more subtle, unconscious vampirism. Let's take a closer look, in psychological terms. Projection is when someone takes parts of themselves they're unwilling to face shame, fear, pain, unresolved trauma, and assigns them to someone else. Deep thinkers, because of their calmness, their presence, their empathy, become the perfect canvas. You feel safe, grounded, non-judgmental. And people sense that. They instinctively release their burdens onto you, not always maliciously, but unconsciously. They see you as a mirror, but mirrors, over time, collect residue. And here lies the danger. When you're constantly absorbing others' emotions, their wounds, their shadows, you begin to blur. Your own clarity dims. Your inner voice, once sharp and grounded, becomes quieter. You lose touch with where they end, and you begin. Your own thoughts get clouded. Your own voice gets quieter. Your own needs become blurry. The boundaries between where others end and you begin fade into the background. And the worst part? No one notices. No one even thinks to ask how you're doing because you're the strong one, the calm one, the one who always seems to have it together, the one people lean on but rarely lean toward. But inside, you're not invincible. You're exhausted, quietly, completely, consistently. This is how the world drains deep thinkers, not loudly, not violently, but through a slow, almost invisible erosion, silently, subtly, systematically, not through cruelty, but through dependency. It's a quiet extraction, like a leak in a pipe you didn't even know was there. Relationships start to feel one-sided. Conversations turn into counseling. Sessions, friendships become emotional rescue missions where you're always the lifeguard, but never the one being saved. And piece by piece, moment by moment, you lose something vital, something irreplaceable. Yourself, Carl Jung, understood this dynamic deeply. He believed the world doesn't merely ignore deep thinkers, it uses them. Not out of conscious malice, but because people are drawn to depth, they crave the truth. They crave emotional clarity, presence, wisdom. But they're also terrified of it. So instead of honoring your depth, they extract it. They take your insight to help themselves understand. They borrow your calm to soothe their chaos. They absorb your energy like sunlight on a cold day. But how often do they give any of it back? And when you finally pull away, when you try to set a boundary, when you whisper, "I need space," or choose silence over being drained, what happens? You're called selfish, cold, distant, as if your refusal to be endlessly available is some kind of betrayal. But what they don't see is that your silence isn't rejection. It's survival. You're not cold. You're recharging. You're protecting what's left of yourself after everyone else has taken their fill. Because being awake, truly awake in an unconscious world isn't just lonely, it's draining. Especially in a world engineered to keep you distracted and disconnected from yourself. Let's talk about media for a moment. The average person is exposed to thousands of ads per day. Thousands of messages whispering the same mantra. You're not enough. Buy this. Fix that. Chase this version of success. Be more. And if you're a deep thinker, you can't help but see the strings behind the show. You notice the manipulation. You see how beauty is sold as worth. How fear is turned into profit. How attention is hijacked, not earned. But here's the trap even when you see through it. Even when you know it's a lie, it still wears you down. Because deep thinkers don't just see the world, they process it, they feel it, they internalize. it. And that takes energy, a kind of energy most people never have to spend. Even something as seemingly simple as scrolling through social media isn't passive for a deep thinker. Every image, every caption, every perfectly curated life, it doesn't just pass through. It lingers. It stirs reflection. It activates questions. Why is everyone pretending to be happy? Why is grief hidden like a shameful secret? Why is vulnerability edited out of our lives as if it's weakness? Carl Jung believed that the collective unconscious shapes our societies more than logic ever could. And right now, that unconscious is deeply afraid of depth. Afraid of what it can't control, can't quantify, can't package or monetize. So the systems we live in, from schools to media to workplaces, are designed not to explore truth, but to suppress it. They tell you, don't slow down, don't ask why, don't pause to feel, don't sit with your sadness. Just keep going. But deep thinkers, they can't just keep going. Not blindly, not without understanding, not without asking, what does any of this even mean? So they pause, they reflect. They feel, and the world punishes them for it. In school, they're labeled as distracted, daydreamers, unfocused. At work, they're seen as too philosophical, not efficient enough. In relationships, they're told they're too intense, too emotional, too complicated. But the truth, they're not to anything. They're simply real, and in a society built on performance. On pretending, on pleasing, being real is a radical act. But radical acts come with consequences. You lose friends. You lose promotions. You lose invitations, not because you're unworthy, but because you refuse to play the game. You refuse to flatter egos you don't respect. Refuse to wear a smile when something deep inside of you is breaking. Refuse to pretend that everything is fine when it's clearly not. And that refusal, it's powerful. It's necessary. But let's not pretend. It's also lonely, Carl Jung once said. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakes? You are awake. You've opened your eyes to things most people would rather ignore. But the price of awakening is often isolation, a heavy cost, especially for those who feel deeply. Still, there is hope. Always, because somewhere out there, scattered across cities, tucked into quiet corners of the world, are others like you. Others who are also observing, also thinking, also wondering, also aching for truth. People who are waiting, sometimes silently, sometimes desperately, for someone to say the thing everyone else is too afraid to admit. And when two deep thinkers meet, something remarkable happens. The illusion cracks. The truth is allowed to breathe, and the soul, it feels, for the first time in a long time, a little less alone. So don't shut yourself off. Don't silence your insight just to be accepted. Don't clip your wings for the comfort of blending. There will come a moment in every deep thinker's life where they ask the hard questions. Is it worth it? Is it worth seeing what others refuse to see? Is it worth carrying thoughts too heavy to speak aloud? Is it worth feeling so much when so few seem to understand? Carl Jung believed that this moment, this internal reckoning, is not a breakdown. It's a beginning. It's the moment you choose. You either shrink back and conform to the world's expectations, or you expand into your truth, even if it means walking alone. The world will not encourage this choice. In fact, it will resist it. It will plead with you to stay silent.
I will.
Reward your numbness with acceptance. It will praise your compliance with applause. It will offer comfort, but at the cost of your truth. And yet deep down you'll know that kind of life isn't living, it's surviving. Surviving isn't enough, not for someone like you. You were born with a mind that refuses to be tamed, a heart that refuses to go numb, a soul that can't pretend to be something it's not. That isn't weakness, that's your calling. Jung once wrote that each of us carries within us a task, a kind of psychological destiny. And the deeper the thinker, the more sacred and demanding the task becomes. Not everyone is meant to go inward. Not everyone is willing to confront the shadow, to walk through the fire of the self, and emerge transformed. But you are. And make no mistake, it is not a comfortable journey. There is no map, no crowds cheering you on. It's no finish line with confetti. Some days, you'll feel completely lost. Other days, cursed like you've been given eyes that see. Too much in a world that wants you blind, but listen closely. That emptiness you sometimes feel, it's not failure, space. Space for something greater to emerge. Because when you finally stop being what the world expects of you, when you stop performing and start being, that's when your true life begins. It's when your soul starts to breathe. Here's what no one tells you. Deep thinkers aren't here to be understood by the many. They're here to awaken the few. So maybe you weren't born to be liked by everyone. Maybe you were born to be a mirror, to show people what they've forgotten, speak what others are too afraid to say. And yes, that comes with solitude. But solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is the ache of feeling unseen, unheard, disconnected. Solitude, on the other hand, is the quiet. It's a sacred moment when you finally begin to see yourself. And when you truly do, when that recognition sinks in, you stop chasing the world's approval like a moving target. You stop begging to be chosen by people who never understood you. Stop bending your truth into bite-sized, palatable pieces just to make others comfortable. Because suddenly, it becomes clear, you were never too much. You were simply too real, too honest. Too deep for a world that thrives on pretending. Carl Jung believed that once we fully embrace our inner complexity, we begin to transform not in some grand, heroic display, but in the quietest, most meaningful of ways. In the way we listen not just to words, but to the spaces between them. The way we hold space for others, for pain, for truth. In the way we refuse to look away from what's uncomfortable, from what's real. You don't need to become a guru. You don't have to write a book. You don't need to fix the entire world. What you do need, though, is this: to stay awake. To honor your depth. To stop apologizing for being who you are. That alone, done consistently and courageously, is a revolutionary act. And in time, something beautiful happens. The right people begin to find you. The ones who crave depth like oxygen. The ones who think in metaphors and speak in symbols. The ones who ask why before they ever ask how much. Yes, those people exist. And they are out there right now, searching for someone like you. Someone who makes them feel less alone in their thoughts, less alien in their truth, less broken in the beauty they carry but never knew how to show. But they can only find you. If you stop hiding, so let the world misunderstand you. Let them call you too serious, too sensitive, too intense. Let them label what they fear. And when they do, smile gently. Then go even deeper. Because the truth is, this world needs you, not the filtered you, not the toned-down version of you that people feel safer around. Not the agreeable, always smiling on demand version of you, no. It needs your rawness, your questions, your silence, your courage. Carl Jung believed that only when individuals commit to transforming themselves can society truly evolve. And who transforms society? Not the loudest voices, not the wealthiest figures, not the ones trending today and forgotten tomorrow, but the most conscious, the ones brave enough to go within, confront their shadows, and come back carrying light. That's you. So, stop asking for permission to be real. Stop waiting for the world to value what it doesn't yet understand. Start valuing yourself so deeply, so unapologetically, that others have no choice but to rise with you, or walk away. Either way, both outcomes are okay, because deep thinking, it was never about being liked. It's about being true to your mind, to your soul, to your reason for being here. And now, if this video made you feel seen, if these words echoed something inside you, some ancient ache you've never been able to explain, then let's keep this space alive. Like this video so it reaches more people like us. Comment below with just one word that describes how you truly feel. Right now, I read every single one. Subscribe and stay close. Because here, you'll never need to apologize for your mind. And if this gave you value, consider sending a super thanks to support more real, raw, honest content. The world may hate deep thinkers, but in time, they'll realize we were the ones trying to save it silently, lovingly, relentlessly, even when no one noticed until